been a handful of developments that have actually utilized the overlay. And when the overlay was created, what was envisioned was something that would call it. So that was one of the things, those added opportunities that was included, is that you could have a development or even a building that may have office use, retail use, restaurant use on the ground floor, and potentially residential on the same property. Or I had an office upstairs, on the second floor or whatever. And again, it was an opportunity, I think, as the Route 22 project was being constructed, planned, engineered, went into construction. A lot of people were looking at what potentially, kind of into the crystal ball, what potentially would be happening on that corridor, and trying to get Murraysville in position to deal with the change of the road and then all the potential development that would follow along the road. Fast forwarding through the years, there's been a number of different proposals along the corridor. Many of them kind of disappeared into the night, so to speak. They proved either not economically feasible from a development standpoint, or they had trouble getting the development to work within the parameters of the existing ordinance. And we use the Buncher property as an example. I think in the time, probably in 15 years, there's been 3 or 4 different concept plans proposed for the former Buncher farm. In that property, it has some challenges. There's a big pipeline that crosses it. It's got quite a bit of elevation gain from 22 to get up to the top of the hill. Coming off of Berlin Farm Road, we all know that that's really low capacity. There's not a lot of opportunity to handle traffic, or whether it's residential or commercial driven traffic. So that's what led to kind of this, let's take a step back and see, are there things that are in the ordinance today that if in today's world, we could be queen or king for the day and we could change, are there things that we should be changing to help actually allow that ordinance to be more responsive to what the market really needs to have? So the audit, we literally went page by page through the ordinance itself. It's not long by any stretch of the imagination, but then checked all the cross references and tried to really do a diagnostic in terms of how that ordinance reads, and then reflect a little bit on what has happened with some of the proposals and some of the discussions that we've heard over the years of why people didn't ever utilize it in terms of the overlay itself. And then the second thing is also reflect on what has happened in the real estate market. Again, when that ordinance was put together, you and I, our view of retail was we went into a store, we physically picked out a product, we went to a cash register, handed it to a cashier, they ran the number, and we probably paid cash. Today, I can sit on my couch and I can order my blue widget and magically it appears at my house the next morning. Or if I did it on a Saturday morning, it may actually show up at the house at the end of Saturday afternoon, right? Retail has completely changed. And the notion of bricks and mortar stores is a little bit different. And so we just were reflecting on, when I look at what's actually in that ordinance to where the world seems to be moving, and I would say has really significantly moved, or the things that, again, we should be changing in terms of the ordinance. So again, the overlay is one district. When you look at the lay of the land, this is the audit part. So when you look at the lay of the land, I'm down at the Old Blue Spruce, that development, and MSA would be on the south side of 22. Those properties, that land actually lays below the roadway, below 22. Visibility is completely different, 100% visible. Traffic Armageddon. To have any really intense uses in that particular area would be a challenge from a traffic standpoint, would be a challenge just because of where signals are today. You have the creek that comes through those properties. It has some challenges. So that area behaves a little bit differently. When I look at the Buncher property, again, completely different set of kind of terrain and circumstances in terms of visibility. You could drive by that all the time. It's perched up way up on the hill. You can't see on top of that hill. Just to get up there is a little bit of a challenge, but its visibility is completely different. So one of the things that we're suggesting is if the municipality wants to start making changes, we probably really need to start thinking of the overlay in terms of different compartments, almost like there's three separate overlays. Or in this case, what we had put in the audit was maybe three sub-districts, so that you could actually have uses and standards specific to each of those different geographic areas where they need to be treated a little bit differently. And so I can handle traffic in a different manner, I can handle land use in a different manner, all those circumstances in some way, shape, or form. The other thing is in the text, when you read the text, while you had envisioned having a mixed-use district and you were going to allow residential, the caveat to the residential, it needed to be a PRD. So it needed to be a planned residential development. And the densities that you actually have in the ordinance are really low for that, what typically would be higher density, something that you're going to see in an apartment, something that you're going to see in a townhouse. And so that may be one reason why you've never had any residential development within this overlay, because from a real estate market standpoint, it doesn't pencil out. You know, no developer could ever get the math to work for the number of units, the limited number of units they would be allowed to have. And with that said, I'm not sure residential is necessarily the most appropriate use for all portions of the corridor. There, you may want to target residential in certain areas and limit that residential in just that area. Again, back to the sub-district, that will be a fairly effective or a very effective way of being able to target different uses to different areas themselves. And I think the other thing is to take a step back and re-examine that heavy emphasis in terms of the commercial uses themselves. Maybe start reflecting a little bit more on where the market is today. We know in the back of the audit, just put in from the fall 2023 Master Builders kind of a report. I can go look at the regional outlook that NAIOP puts together, ULI, all the different development publications that represent the region or report on the region. Vacancy in office is significantly down. That started going down before COVID. COVID certainly didn't help it. Retail has changed, as I had mentioned earlier. And so the notion of building big shopping centers, these planned commercial districts, is probably not something that you're going to see in a large order of magnitude is really diminished. You thus far have seen smaller developments, commercial developments, as you're moving up towards Indiana or towards Blairsville in 22. Those commercial developments are smaller scale. While they're still a larger footprint, they're still under 100,000 square feet significantly. They're probably 50,000 square feet at the most. And so tuning those standards, whatever the development standards end up being, to what I think where the market really is going and wants to be, is probably something that we'll be taking on in some way, shape, or form. So what we did is we had laid out, the audit represented phase one. We then got with Michael and Jim, and we started laying out kind of an approach for what we call phase two. And so council wanted to basically kind of delve into phase two, and hence why we're here, because we need to get you all up to speed. And ultimately, if there are recommendations in terms of potential amendments, the recommendations want to come from the Planning Commission themselves. So what we laid out was a phase two scope that over the course of a couple months will take you through the kind of our first pass at how to maybe frame out the sub-districts and then specific potential amendments. Play that to you guys, let you beat it up, and then kind of work through that refinement process. And so that in a few months, this doesn't need to be an extensive land use study or land use analysis, but we'll be able to have language that will be replacement language in terms of the ordinance. So you, again, can go through that in detail, make whatever refinements, and then we can hopefully make some sort of recommendation to council for final amendment. So this is something that I would think probably February through July, we'd be actively kind of working together through that process and hopefully have it on the doorstep of council come midsummer. Did I miss anything?
That's good. Thank you, AJ.
You got hit with a lot of stuff.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the map back
That's what
here,
I'm doing.
like at the end of the audit. So it looks like that area that you were talking about where we got some issues with traffic, like and things like that across from the Blue Spruce,
Yeah.
that would be potential areas to target for something where it could be residential. Hired as a residential.
Yeah, and that kind of jives with, if you go back and you look at the comprehensive plan, the western side of the municipality, where is kind of the older section in terms of development, you also have more infrastructure in place. So the comprehensive plan, it anticipated if there was going to be higher density development, it really would be on the western end, particularly around the Sardis Road area. Because what you've always been trying to do, particularly in Old William Penn, is begin to develop kind of that village type of feel. And the village, it's not spread out so far. So that would be the place to do that. As you move down towards Delmont, no, I don't think that's the appropriate thing. Hence, you would have a different sub-district down there. And you would have different standards, different uses permitted within that particular sub-district. We all work under that framework of the overlay. We're just kind of breaking it into 3 different buckets.
Is an area where MSA is, because it does lie below the road, you could probably also go with a multi-story building, and that wouldn't be
Yeah, right.
a big problem. So
Right.
if you're trying to do residential and get unit density up, might be a possibility.
Yep.
Yeah. This one. You know, the problem with that piece of property, in my opinion, is access. I mean, that intersection with Pleasant Valley Road and Meadowbrook Road coming down across the bike trail, that's a problem right there. And even the intersection of Meadowbrook Road where it meets Pleasant Valley Road, I think that's very dangerous and should be looked at. I don't know if you need stop signs or a realignment, but there's so much traffic right there. I don't know how you're going to put more traffic around that intersection.
You're hitting exactly why council is accepting the fact that there's some stuff that's a little out of kilter, and now's probably the time to make those changes. But we also can establish, based on the earlier presentation, it's probably not a place to put too many pickleball courts, given your parking requirement that you have for people. Because you'll have thousands of spaces down there. But to your point, it can't be it's not a site for a regional mall, because it can't
handle it.
It can't handle it. There's not enough ways of being able to move traffic in and out.
That next red square to the right, to the west of Lillian Avenue, that's where Choice Auto is now,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
So we could almost even take that off the map because that's,
They
already
still
been
fall in you're correct. If there was ever a change of use, those properties are still eligible. The one thing we didn't do is suggest, because I don't think there's any reason to do this, a lot of the corridor falls in the overlay, right? There's a couple pockets where there's property that aren't in the overlay. I think they still benefit from it. So while they may be occupied in, active, vibrant uses, in 10 years, there may be a different need. Now, those sections, though, you're starting to hit at is some of them are smaller lots. They don't have the same acreage of, say, like the MSA area or the Buncher Farm, those larger blocks. They're going to be largely on that small scale retail restaurant side because they're the only uses that really can fit on those properties. So some of the corridor, you're not going to see dramatic changes. But I certainly can't treat those properties the same as the Buncher Farm. Then as you get down there at Delmont, you still have a few large blocks of land. Some of that you've had some recent proposals and have had approvals, you know, so there may be a little bit of change over there, but I'm not sure there's going to be anything dramatic.
What were the past proposals that faded away?
So I'll just use Buncher as the example, just because those are kind of in my head. There was the one proposal that was basically a commercial center. So this would not be developing a regional mall per se, but what we would call a power center. So it was outdoor shopping, but hundreds of thousands of square feet. So that required a lot of earth moving to get that plateau established. And actually, there is a entrance that is designed in 22. As I'm headed towards Blairsville, I pass Rick's. I'm starting to crawl up that hill to the left where the Weir median is. That is built as another entrance, which was designed to give access to the Buncher Farm. And again, that hillside, when you look at the Buncher Farm property, that hill's probably 80 foot high. I mean, that topo goes up, maybe exaggerating a little bit, 60 feet high. It's fairly significant. The traffic improvements along 22, I think, and Jim, correct me if you have a different opinion on this, have adequate capacity to deal with the types of land uses you had in the overlay. It's some of these other roads like Pleasant Valley where I may have to access that you don't really have the capacity to deal with that stuff. So finish answering. So there was a large commercial development. Then there was a mixed-use development that did, on the side of the Buncher Farm closest to export, had residential development. I think it was duplexes and still single-family homes. And then the front side towards 22 was commercial development. Then when Excella purchased the property, they had looked at it as originally they purchased the property with the eye for a regional hospital. So then that got ensnarled in what was happening in Monroeville between Forbes and UPMC. They looked at then, which is something I did work on, was a plan for almost like a wellness community. So there was a little bit of outpatient care. There was a sports complex. And there were some other users that were on the healthcare side. It was largely office or laboratory space.
I had heard rumors about some of those proposals. Were there zoning issues that prevented those projects from going forward, or was it financial reasons? I mean, is what we're proposing going to help develop that piece and other pieces?
Yeah, so it's a good question. The objective that we all have been tasked with is to figure out how to get the ordinance in a better place to make it, to create a more attractive path for somebody to develop the properties. So in some cases, on the Buncher Farm, when the commercial and the residential development were proposed, they had used just duplexes and single-family homes because that's what the ordinance only allowed. Okay. They couldn't get enough units to actually pay for the cost of the roads and all the infrastructure. Again, that site has no infrastructure. I mean, it's not like it's down at MSA where is infrastructure in place. You're starting from scratch.
Thank you.
Do your A, B, and C
I don't have my phone to tell 'em.
game plan, do they align with the eastern, central, and western that's on page 3?
Kind of.
Okay,
Again, this was just starting to put ideas down based on the audit.
Okay.
I think largely the pattern does follow that. Once we get into the detail, there may be some nuance here and there, but I think largely the way you described it.
okay.
There are a couple little pockets that are in the middle that I think are going to stay kind of in that more commercial side of things, and maybe surrounded with possibly some other sub-district. But once we get in parcel by parcel and looking at it, I'll be able to better tell you.
So that like behind Rick's, the farm that we keep referring to, that's, look, that would be C, right?
That's green.
That's
Yes,
green.
correct.
So that would eliminate residential from a potential use for that?
Given that people have tried residential numerous times, I'm not sure that's either one that makes sense to raise the density. I could see raising the density maybe down in this section on the Sardis end down here. Again, that's something we have to talk through, but that's the initial thought.
So where do we go from here? What would you like us to do?
I'm back next month.
Well, the idea is to begin work on the plan as outlined on the other, file in the Dropbox and begin to work and have planning commission respond to their recommendations.
I think that you're going to be looking at, okay, if you're going to redistrict these like this, right, you're going to say, okay, well, here's what, expand on that, right, and here's what we're thinking in those districts would make sense.
Right.
That's when I said we'll be back next month. I'll come with a proposal to do that.
Okay.
Have you guys review that, criticize it, commend it, whatever, and we kind of go through that review and refinement process. The other thing that I would put on there is the map. We'll take the first pass at kind of where is the line between a sub-district A and a B. Is it this parcel or this parcel? Do that first pass of that. I think then what you're going to end up doing is over the course, that's going to simmer for a couple months. You'll go back and forth with some changes. I'm saying I'm doing this for 30 years.
Yeah.
So your second big step is then defining the standards. So the way your ordinance was structured, so the way the overlay is structured, you have standards for things like building height and setbacks, those types of things. But for some of these potential uses, when I look at what you have in there, you may want to have some additional standards. Some things that are better protecting adjacent land uses or, views, those types of things. So probably about month 3, that's when we'll start presenting you those. So the first month or two, it's focus on the uses where the district, the sub-districts would be, refining that stuff, introducing some new land uses, suggest maybe removing some land uses. Then month 3, get into the standards. So that'll probably take a couple months to go through the standards. Then hopefully we'll be ready to have something that we can do a briefing with council and begin that starting adoption process. I have no idea.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sorry.
Mike, can you get Bob to mute that? Is that where that sound's coming from? Can you mute it?
Tell him to turn his mic off.
Turn him down, then if he talks, you won't hear him.
So have you looked at the area, so you have that area up on Greensburg Road?
Yeah.
How does that coincide with what's going on across the boundary there?
Oh,
Yeah, you have it as, what is that, A?
It's red.
So that's red, that's another,
yeah, now, some of those, I'll be candid. That whole section is, lay of the land is so dramatically different. I have a feeling that at the end of the day, you'll probably keep that kind of in the sub-district structure. While it goes into a sub-district, the types of uses and the dimensional standards are probably going to be fairly consistent with what you have now. That one, if I was king back 20 years ago, probably would have treated those areas a little bit differently. Just because the land use is so much different, or the visibility is so much different than the rest of 22.
That's 286.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, so 286, 366, and 22 are the three. So my hope, Jim, is for planning commission work sessions, you would typically do the applications that are on. Then at the tail end, we would do this stuff. So hopefully we get a good 30, 45 minutes to go through stuff, because there will be, you're going to have to be eventually reading detailed stuff, and the first couple of meetings really kind of going through simple lists and maps. But then as we get into actual text amendments, just as you guys know, there's more stuff that your homework assignments get bigger.
As does our pay, huh?
Now that I know that you have a Dropbox and you have plenty of time to read stuff ahead of time.
Yeah, you hear that?
I heard that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with all the areas that are there, and, you know, if you come up with land uses, potential land uses for the different dotted in spots, I'm certainly gonna take a drive around and take a look at them.
I would strongly encourage that.
Right.
I mean, if you have a Saturday afternoon, take a ride. Because when you look at, again, it's one thing to look at a map and then read the book and see the uses. When you then connect the dots to actually driving by and say, can I imagine them developing that property in that manner? That's kind of what you're going through.
Well, one problem that I have going into New Ken, I see the area that's dedicated to the general overlay, but when I look at this map, I don't know what's already there and what isn't already there, and where the property lines.
We're going to give you all that.
Yeah.
We'll have all that. The other thing on that one, there's significant floodplain.
Yeah,
Some of that property, it's really deceiving. Once I take the topo
unbuildable.
and then the floodplain, there's a lot of land there that looks like you're dealing with. The truth is, there's not much developable land.
Right.
And so I go back to my comment earlier of, given that natural constraint that's on those properties, I'm not sure I would have put them in the same overlay as the 22.
yeah, I think it's a good idea to have these separate overlays, because like you said, the topography and the uses, they're not all the same, so it's kind of hard to lump them all together and think it's gonna work.
Yeah, and again, right now we think they're all going to be in the same overlay. We're just making them sub-districts.
I
right?
understand.
And the reason we're staying in that structure is because that's the structure you kind of adopted the ordinance under. So we're just trying to keep that same framework.
That area that's across from the triangle, area where the old Stamey junkyard used to be. There's some residential houses mixed in there, because I mean, when, I think Tony came in with that proposal where he wanted to have that business plot turned into like an R1 or.
You
an
mean
R2.
across from Rick's?
Pardon?
Across from Rick's, okay.
And of course, there were two houses there, and then, people came in all up in arms about how their life was gonna change.
Right.
So what do you foresee for that area?
Okay, so you're talking on the south side of the 22 road.
Correct.
That drops down there, right?
Right.
Yeah, that, the
Well,
first part of the property drops down.
right. And
Then
it
there
does go
is a
up
rise.
to
You're
School Road
correct.
South.
So the way that the ordinance is structured, the single-family homes were uses that were permissible in the district. So nobody was ever turned into a non-conforming use in any way, shape, or form. But in terms of if there's a change in the future, we do have to look at how you deal with what land use is going down, because in some cases it's significantly down. And then the reverse, when I'm so high, is it practical to make that a commercial use? Probably not. So right now, I'm thinking we can do this in the 3 sub-districts. If we have to create a 4th typology, I'll call it, to deal with something that's largely going to remain residential, then that's what we do. So I think once we go through the detailed lay of the land, and that's our next step, you'll get a better sense of that.
So basically, it's zone business right now, and you're saying that if it didn't
Now,
make sense for.
see, there in some cases, some of the properties are zone business. Some of the properties are zone residential.
Right.
The business overlay went over top of those. So those property owners that are in, say, an R1 district, but also the business overlay, benefit from having both
More
types of uses. They have a little bit more variety, or they have more options to work with. So I just have to kind of get all that stuff to jive. But where we see the lay of the land would be very difficult for non-residential types of uses. That's where we'll propose something back to you guys, and like I said, let you critique it.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No? Should be interesting.
Do your
Thank you.
homework.
Do your homework. Go for a ride.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thanks, AJ.
Well, I just turned the mic off, hit the button, unless he's
I
talking.
couldn't hear.
Is there any other business for us, Jim?
No, sir.
I make a motion.
All right.
We're out of here.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye. Bye, Bob.